Undocumented migrants didn't cross the line crossed us. Right? So this idea that undocumented migrants, particularly those coming from Mexico, when they cross into the United States without papers, they're crossing into lands that used to be Mexico, therefore that shouldn't be considered an illegal act. No one is illegal on stolen land, essentially, is the philosophy of this.
For years, politicians have warned that immigrants are invading America.
They invaded our country.
It doesn't even look like the United States of America anymore.
This country witnessed an invasion at our southern border.
But the truth is, if you look back at history, the United States was the one doing the invading. First indigenous land, then Mexico.
The Mexican dictator Porfirio Diaz said, "Poor Mexico, so far from God, so close to the United States."
A war, a land grab, and a made-up ideology that justified acquiring half a country. The people didn't move, the border did. Yet generations later, that history has been buried.
Many Americans know more about European history than they know of the southern neighboring country that shares a 2,000-mile-long border with the United States.
And the worst part is how that erasure still shapes who belongs and who doesn't. So how did millions of people come to be seen as invaders without ever crossing a border? From its earliest years, the US was a nation on the move, pushing its borders farther west with each generation. By the 1840s, that drive had a new name: Manifest Destiny. The idea that the US was destined to stretch across the continent, from coast to coast. There was just one problem. Much of that land already belonged to Mexico.
What makes this concept problematic is that there are peoples, communities, individuals in the way of white American expansion westward.
In 1844, James K. Polk ran for president on that vision of expansion. California, New Mexico, and the Pacific Coast were all part of that goal. At first, he tried to buy the land. He sent diplomats to Mexico City with an offer.
The US government secretly offered Mexico $25 million for New Mexico and the Californias.
But Mexico refused to even meet them. So the strategy shifted, and he provoked a war with Mexico. In 1846, US troops moved into disputed territory along the Texas border. It was a move that made conflict almost inevitable, and soon, fighting broke out between American and Mexican forces.
They had other ways that they could have pursued in their attempt to expand the United States across the continent, but in the end, they chose colonial conquest and military adventurism.
Polk brought the issue to Congress, claiming Mexico had attacked American soldiers on American soil. The US declared war. Nearly 2 years later, on February 2nd, 1848, the war officially came to an end, with the signing of the Treaty of Guadalupe, Hidalgo, after a brutal conflict that left thousands dead and forced Mexico into negotiations. With it, Mexico lost more than half its territory, including present-day California, Nevada, Utah, New Mexico, most of Arizona and Colorado, and parts of Oklahoma, Kansas, and Wyoming.
One of the interesting things about the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo is that it took several months for it to be signed. The Americans, including the U.S. Representative Nicholas Trist, could not find any Mexican official that was willing to negotiate an end to the war. Mexico was militarily forced to sign the treaty as a way to get the U.S. military to withdraw from the very center of Mexico. They were afraid that perhaps the Americans were going to ask for more territorial concessions.
In return, the US paid Mexico $15 million and promised protections for what is estimated to have been tens of thousands of Mexican people already living there, including US citizenship and property rights. But those protections quickly became difficult to enforce. Land titles were questioned, documents were challenged, and ownership became something Mexican families had to fight to prove in American courts. Across California, Texas, and New Mexico, Mexican landowners began to lose their property through courts and legal systems, processes made worse by violence and intimidation. In Texas, white mobs lynched Mexicans to terrorize families in an attempt to seize their land, often accusing them of crimes like theft without any formal charges or trials. And in California, the gold rush fueled violence against Mexicans, as white settlers fought for land, gold, and power. Mob attacks, lynchings, and racial slurs turned mining towns into sites of widespread terror. But resistance followed.
Mexican Americans did not just simply, passively accept their fate as second-class citizens. They used the courts, they used lawyers to help protect their citizenship rights in their lands. They had cultural methods of resistance, like the development of Spanish language newspapers and forms of communication. You also had violent forms of resistance in the form of what historians generally refer to as social banditries.
In 1889, organized movements like las Gorras Blancas, led by three brothers, emerged in New Mexico to push back against land seizures and the fencing of common land.
Something like 1,000 to 1,500 of these guerrilla fighters burned down buildings, cut barbed wire, occupied lands. This was a populist movement from below, from the grassroots, that essentially was demanding land and liberty.
Over time, Mexican Americans became part of the new nation taking shape. But belonging was difficult to achieve. Schools pushed assimilation, Spanish was discouraged. Entire generations were told belonging meant letting go of who they were. And yet, they adapted. They built, they stayed. Today, millions of Mexican Americans live across the country, shaping its culture, its economy, and its identity. Yet Mexicans have continued to be viewed as outsiders, and some of those narratives are getting traction once again.
It's highly concerning when the Department of Homeland Security shares John Gath's 1872 Manifest Destiny painting. If you look at it carefully on the bottom left-hand corner, you see indigenous peoples driven out, right? So it's a celebration of ethnic cleansing. It's a celebration of displacing peoples who don't fit the normative view of what Manifest Destiny holds for the United States, which at its core, it's a white supremacist vision.
So when these ideas resurface, the question becomes what comes next? Because we've seen how this story plays out before.
No one is illegal on stolen land.